This is Medill Sports Talk, where we break down the news this week for the sports you love. Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's MLB segment on Medill Sports Talk. I'm Jordan Klein, joined at the desk today by a couple of dashing Dans. Atlanta Braves superfan Daniel Comer, and a special guest making his first ever appearance on the show, Dan Order, handsome gentleman to my right here. So, guys, America's pastime is officially in full swing, and it wouldn't be a Major League Baseball season if we didn't talk about the biggest rivalry of them all, Yankees-Red Sox. The two teams atop the AL East are facing off this week with more star power than a Stallone and Schwarzenegger Expendables movie. For the Yankees, there's Judge, Stanton, Didi, Sevy. For the Red Sox, Mookie, Xander, Sale, and Kimbrel. So Dan, I'll start with you first, being the Beantown sports fanatic that you are. Sorry to give away your bias here. But between these two titan teams of the AL East, which player, in your opinion, is the most exciting to watch?
Yeah, so Jordan, this one's pretty easy for me, and it's got to be Mookie Betts. I'm sick of tuning in too late to these Red Sox games because he's always leading off with home runs. And even when he does, there's a chance that he's going to hit another homer in the game, another 2 homers. That's just the type of player he is. He's a change maker, and let's not forget this guy came up as a second baseman. And to watch a 5'9" guy who came up as a second baseman in right field hosing runners at second, nothing gets me going more than that.
So Mookie Betts, most exciting player for you. Daniel, you agree?
So I want to start by pointing something out here. This is the first time yesterday since 2003, before the curse of the Bambino was broken, that the Yankees and Red Sox entered a series with the best record in MLB, the top 2 records in MLB. That's great for baseball. They're going to be playing in London next year. That's definitely something to watch there. I agree with Dan. It's got to be Mookie Betts. The guy steals bases. He hits home runs. He hits for a high average. He hits with a high average with runners in scoring position. Let me give you some stats real quick, or give you some rankings. First in the MLB in average, first in home runs, seventh in the AL in RBIs, second in WAR in Major League Baseball. He's already got 2 Gold Gloves. He's only 25 years old. 26 stolen bases the past 2 years. This guy can do it all. He turns singles into doubles, doubles into triples. This is the guy to watch. This is the guy that's really going to probably win the MVP award this season.
He's such an incredible talent, and it's got to be so reassuring for Boston fans to see this year, after the down year that he had last year, to turn things on the way that he has at the start of the season is incredible. And speaking of incredible play, given the way that these two teams are playing, there's a very good chance that we're going to see them both in October. So, Daniel, which one of these two teams do you think is going to make the deepest postseason run?
So when you look at these two teams, you have to think, well, how do they match up in the lineup? I think that they're pretty even in the lineup. They're both deep lineups. Pitching rotation, both pretty good pitching rotations. There are question marks when it comes to their aces. Severino didn't do too well in his 16 innings pitched in the postseason. Chris Sale is notoriously bad in September and October. He didn't pitch well in his postseason start last year. So when you look at that, if the teams are basically even, how are they going to improve? Which team has the best chance of making it? I have to look at the farm systems. What about the trade deadline? Which team has the pieces to get that next guy that's going to take their team to the next level? You look at what the Cubs did a few years ago with Aroldis Chapman. They pick up Aroldis Chapman because they were able to trade Gleyber Torres. Chapman helped them win the World Series that year. The Yankees are in position to do that. They were Keith Law's second-ranked team in the MLB preseason farm rankings. And you also look at the Red Sox, 24th. I don't think the Red Sox have the pieces to improve as the season goes on.
That's such a good point with these two teams, given how star-studded they are. It's so easy to only focus on the Major League ball clubs and forget how much talent that Yankees farm system has in their reserves. Dan, what do you think? Is it going to be the Yankees or your lovable Red Sox?
I do agree that these teams are very close in a lot of ways. Both teams have a formidable offense. Both teams have strong pitching. I think the thing with the Yankees that I see as a whole is that they have a ton of strikeouts. They have the 9th most strikeouts in baseball. And in the playoffs, when you're facing more elite pitching, I think that hole is going to start to widen. They're going to become a little bit exposed because of that. And because of that, I'm going with the Red Sox.
I think it's a good idea. It's a great pick. These two teams are so strong. Either way, I think we can definitely expect to see both of them very late in October this year. So we've talked a little bit about the AL. Shifting focus now to the National League, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the hometown Chicago Cubs. currently sitting in 4th place in the NL Central. The Cubs are coming off a 5-game losing streak before this current series with the Miami Marlins. They've been hamstrung by poor pitching, a lack of timely hitting, and now they've sent both Jason Hayward and Yu Darvish to the DL. So Daniel, is it too early for Cubs fans to panic about this slow start, or is this team really in trouble?
This team is fine. I think everyone needs to relax, as Aaron Rodgers said a few years ago when the Packers got off to a slow start. The Cubs, Theo Epstein, recently went on the record saying, hey, I'd rather these guys have these struggles early, lose a couple games because they didn't get lucky with some home runs, so they could build from that, so that they could learn from that experience. The other thing to look at, up to this point in the season last year, the Cubs were 17-16, 1.5 games behind the St. Louis Cardinals in the NL Central. Guess what they are this year? 1 game better, 18-15. Guess where they are? 1.5 games behind the Cardinals in the NL Central. Who won the division last year? The Chicago Cubs by 6 games. I think they'll be okay. They also have pieces. We've talked about that. Joe Maddon's still figuring out how he wants to align this lineup. And also, you mentioned Jason Hayward's out. Is that a bad thing? He has been probably a net negative offensively for that team. He's been great defensively, but he's not been living up to that contract. The one big question mark I have is Yu Darvish. Are you going to replace Jake Arrieta? There's some question marks about that, especially coming off Darvish's very weak performance in the postseason last year.
No, absolutely. I mean, at least hearing you talk positively about the Cubs, being a diehard Cubs fan myself, eases a little bit of my stress. Right. Dan, what do you think?
I think it's definitely too early to panic. I think the thing with this is that if the Cubs were to continue playing the way that they have been playing, they'd actually be okay. So far, they've outscored opponents by 34 runs. So that actually indicates to me that they're playing better than their record suggests. And the thing to not lose sight of here, too, is that they have the most valuable person in baseball, and that's Theo Epstein. He's the Elon Musk of building world championship teams. And so, I think that you have to have full faith in him. If they need to make moves during the season, there's no person I'd rather be more confident in than Theo Epstein. And yeah, I think they're actually playing pretty well.
I love that, the Elon Musk of building world championship baseball teams. I've never heard that metaphor before, but I like it. And one thing Epstein is so good at doing is spotting players who may fly under the radar, whether it's due to lack of experience, maybe a lack of height. That's something that we've been talking about actually amongst ourselves that I want to bring up now, a larger discussion here during this segment, right? Because we've been talking amongst ourselves over the past week. Maybe it's on my mind with the NFL Combine still in recent memory, but I know that you guys both have opinions on this topic. And that's just the fact that height is such a major factor in sports like basketball or football. And in baseball, the answer is a little more unclear because when you look at the top 2 vote getters in last year's AL MVP race, you see Aaron Judge on one extreme, you see Jose Altuve on the other. So Dan, I'm going to turn to you first because this is something that you and I specifically have talked about over the past couple of weeks. How much does height matter in the game of baseball?
Right, so I think we're starting to get over it a little bit. I think before it used to be a knock on players to be under 6 feet tall, but now we're realizing, especially with this launch angle information that's coming out, we're starting to realize that the shape of players' swings is really important to their home run totals. And so, you don't need these Judgian 500-foot home runs in order to be a power hitter. You can be Altuve or Mookie Betts and hit the ball mid 300 feet and it counts just the same. And I think the thing here too is that there's probably a graveyard of players who had the skills of Pedroia or Altuve or Mookie Betts and never made it to the big leagues because they weren't taught from a young age to swing for the fences.
That's a very good point. And Dan, you have personal experience in this matter. Talk to us a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on the matter?
So in that launch angle point is something that's been I've had a lot of dissonance with that because I grew up hit down on the ball. I wonder where my career would have been, right? To get backspin. Where I would have been if they were saying, hey, that uppercut's not such a bad thing. Take that King Griffey approach, King Griffey Jr. approach. What I look at when I look at the size of baseball players and scouts, last year in the first round of the MLB draft, only one player was drafted below 6 feet. He was 5'11", Keston Hiura, to the Milwaukee Brewers, second baseman. So that's the thing you have to look at here. Whenever MLB teams are drafting, they're looking for guys that have size. One of the big things they look at is athleticism. That's how they grade their projection. A shortstop's typically going to be at least 6 feet tall. A first baseman, you're never going to see someone below 6 feet. That's just how it is. They need to be able to stretch. Now, when it comes to pitchers, I know we've spoken a little bit about that. There's something to it. For durability concerns, you want a bigger guy. You also want a guy who can have a longer step towards the plate. The ball really gets up on you. When it comes to advantages, though, there are some, I think, for smaller ball players, especially when they're in the batter's box. That's a smaller strike zone. The pitchers, they're going to have to throw strikes in a smaller window. That's an advantage because then you got guys maybe walking, getting on base more, stealing bases. So there are definitely pluses and minuses to both. But really what I think it comes down to is opportunity. I had some kids who I grew up playing with, maybe only 5'7", but hit 400. These kids were studs, played at East Cobb the whole 9 yards, should have been first round picks. First Division I baseball players didn't even get D3 offers. So that's something you have to look at, and it comes down to these scouts, projectability, opportunity.
Yeah, it's like Dan said, there's probably a graveyard of guys who
There are.
had the
Absolutely.
skills,
Absolutely.
but given when they were playing baseball, the knowledge just wasn't out there.
Right.
And that's something I love about this sport too, is how often the game is changing when it comes to analytics, when it comes to what matters. It's a game so rooted in tradition, but now is on the forefront of so many new developments. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So, guys, now before we wrap up this part of the show today, it's time for a little fantasy baseball segment. Because one thing that you all at home should probably know about our newsroom here at Medill is how big fantasy baseball is. I'm looking at you, Aaron Rose, if you're watching. So, in the spirit of that fantasy mania, I'm going to ask you both, who is one player that you need to have on your team right now, either picking them up through free agency or trades, and who's another player that you should drop? I mean, I need this help more than anybody. I'm in the top 3 of our league right now. I'd like to move into that 1 or 2 spot. What do you think?
I'll start by saying I regret trading you Gleyber Torres. We'll start with that. The second thing I'll say, when you're looking at guys you want to pick up, I always look at free agency, who doesn't have a high own percentage in leagues. And right now I'm looking at Atlanta Braves prospect who's gone through 2 starts, Mike Soroka. He's a guy that has been just totally gushed about in the Braves organization. The Braves have a lot of depth. His first start, he went 6 innings, 1 earned. His second start, he battled a little bit, but he showed his maturity. The Braves could have sent him down. I think that was the original plan, but the fact that they're keeping him up, he's a top 50 prospect, one of the best right-handed pitching prospects in baseball, control guy, mature. Get Mike Soroka on your roster, only owned in 33% of leagues.
And is Soroka available in our league?
No, I drafted him. Well, I drafted him, dropped him, and then picked him up in free agency.
There you go. So that's one guy you got to be on the lookout for. Dan Order, what about you?
So Anthony Rizzo has had a terrible year. He's hitting under the Mendoza line. It's not looking good. Trade for him. He is a consistency in that Cubs lineup. If you look at the last 4 years, I mean, there's like no variation in any of his stats. He's a core guy, and he might not reach those totals that he did last year, but he's going to perform well from here on out. The Cubs have a relatively easy series coming up against the White Sox, and they don't have a great pitching staff. I think he's going to perform well in this series.
I love that pick. It's very fitting with you. We've talked financial investments. He seems like a Warren Buffett kind of an investment for me. Consistent returns.
Buy low, baby.
Over a long period of time, buy low, sell high. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here on the MLB segment of Medill Sports Talk. So be sure to follow us on Snapchat and Twitter at Medill Sport Talk. And be sure to leave a comment on this YouTube video complimenting the handsome Dan Order on a job well done during his first show, because he deserves it. Dan, it's a pleasure to have on. Until next time, for the 2 Dans, the rest of our production crew, I'm Jordan Klein. I hope to see you again soon.